been a long time. Not a lot of things change. I'm sure you can tell, judging by the title, I'm going to be talking about shiny, happy people, but not so much the documentary itself as much as it is the cult that the Duggars grew up in relation to the cult that I grew up in. The Duggars grew up in the IBLP cult, which is talked about a lot in the newest docuseries Happy Shiny People, and I was raised Apostolic Pentecostal. There are a lot of similarities between the two cults, so much so that even growing up we referenced the Duggars a lot for how to learn how to live life. Like before I could go on my first courtship date, I had to read the Duggars book on dating. So, at the age of 12, my mom converted to Apostolic Pentecostalism, and Pentecostalism was founded in 1901.
In Topeka, Kansas.
A dude named Charles Fox was hosting a church seminar, and a kid named Agnes was said to have spoken in tongues that day. There are so many things to talk about when it comes to Apostolic Pentecostalism as a cult, but one of the most basic things that everybody needs to know is it completely surrounds speaking in tongues as evidence of the Holy Spirit. And that's always a huge part as evidence. They added that into the Bible. They claim that it's an Acts, but it's not. According to the Bible, there are multiple gifts of the Holy Spirit, but this cult disregards all of them if you do not speak in tongues. Beyond the basis of speaking in tongues, a lot of the cult is surrounded by controlling women, which is something that I always saw as far as the Duggars as well. When it comes to keeping their hair long and wearing modest skirts and no short sleeve shirts, things like that. The reasons the Duggars keep their hair long within their cult is because the man of the house prefers it that way, and the cult itself sees it as a more modest way of living. The reason that Apostolic Pentecostals keep their hair long or really aren't supposed to cut their hair at all. My time in the cult, I didn't cut my hair at all except for when I was still in school, which led me to getting into a lot of trouble. Apostolic Pentecostals don't cut their hair because of, it's either like 1 Corinthians 11:6 or 11:15, which basically says that a woman's hair is her glory, it is her power, it is her covering. And you're not supposed to pray in a church uncovered. So their logic is if you cut your hair, you're taking off your covering within a church setting and you're praying uncovered, which you're not supposed to do. And you're also taking away your glory and you're taking away your power over the angels. Yeah, so my mom converted when I was 12, so between the ages of 12 and about 17, I want to say, I didn't cut my hair. When I was in 9th grade, I actually cut myself some side swept bangs that I kept hidden from my mom by braiding my hair back or like wearing a headband so you couldn't see the ends of my hair. But one day I came home from school and it was super windy and I didn't have anything to like hold my braid in or hold a headband back, so I got found out, and then she threatened to shave my head while I read 1 Corinthians to explain why I shouldn't cut my hair. Good news, I didn't have to shave my head, I just had to wear a covering in church because you cannot
Pray uncovered in this cult.
The cult that the Duggars were a part of is a lot more organized than the cult that I was a part of, and I believe it's because their cult is truly trying to create a Christian extremist army. So within trying to create that Christian extremist army, you do have to focus on certain parts of education that will later give them the tools that they need to succeed at penetrating the government and schools and everything that they need for this
weird fucking Christian extremist army cult thing.
Apostolic Pentecostals are just kind of dumb, man. I got pulled out of school in 9th grade. There was no homeschooling anything that was set for any of us. Lots of people that I met through Apostolic Pentecostal churches, Apostolic Pentecostal camps.
Those are scary ass shit. Those are so fucking weird.
But a lot of these people hadn't heard like basic things that you're learning in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade and they're 15 years old. The Apostolic Pentecostal cult kind of relies on ignorance to keep it going. You grow up not learning a lot, often homeschooled. Then you turn 16 and you either start working on a farm or in a factory. And you turn 18, you want to get married because you're not allowed to have sex until you get married. So you usually get married young, start popping out a lot of babies, teach those kids the same thing. And it is an endless cycle of people who are perpetuating this cult, this religion, and this lifestyle of getting married young and popping out a bunch of babies and just working in your local factory. Never experiencing anything really in life. Never educating yourself further beyond what you've learned in small town cult life. As a woman within the cult, you are taught that your husband is the head of the household. He follows God and you follow him. You're supposed to
submit to your husband.
And that was something that was talked about a lot in the docuseries that I wouldn't call triggering, but was very like, ding, fucking forgot that was a goddamn thing, like, to submit to your husband. And it's really funny because I mentioned it on TikTok after I'd watched the docuseries about how weird it was to hear the phrase submitting to your husband again. And somebody was like, oh, submitting isn't as bad as it sounds. It's not like you're, like, bowing down to your husband. It's a leap of faith you're taking. That is what they say in the cults. That is literally what they say in the cults. Everybody they literally are like,
I know it sounds scary word to submit to your husband, but it really is just a thing of trust.
no, it's not. It is to follow your husband unwaveringly so no matter what he does. You are supposed to submit to him. You do everything he tells you to, and that is your entire life. It's not a thing of trust. Why would you marry somebody you don't trust? That's why, like, you'll see, like, Josh Duggar's wife sticking by him probably through the entire rest of his life. She grew up with no education. She was taught her entire life that she has to submit to her husband, and no matter what, unwaveringly so. You're also taught that God tries you by fire once you're baptized, so every bad thing that happens to you, you automatically just go, this is just God testing me, and I just have to prove myself to get out of it. So when worst comes to worst, God is seeing me as a stronger person. So this poor, uneducated woman with a shit ton of kids is now going through the worst thing in her life, which is what her husband is, and she's going to stick by him because that is what she's been taught. That is all she knows, and that's how these cycles are continued to be perpetuated. They just get people stuck. Dumb and stuck. When I was 16, I dated an apostolic Pentecostal boy. Mind you, my mom converted when I was 12 years old, and prior to that, she raised me as an atheist. This boy was born and raised in this cult. And honestly, when I say that we dated, I don't mean that we dated, we courted. Courting is when you date for marriage, but like intentionally for marriage, but you also have a chaperone with you on your dates. You're not alone. So my little brother would join us on our dates. I think it was Jill and Derek when they started dating on the show 19 Kids and Counting was when I started courting the boy that I was dating at the time. And there were so many similarities that we did as far as chaperones go, it being a courtship and the parents like monitoring their texts. I believe on the show, Jim Bob and Michelle are like in a group text and so that they can see everything, and I texted him through my mom's phone so she could go through everything. I found this docuseries to be incredibly interesting and borderline triggering for somebody who has grown up in a cult that was so similar. Like, we looked up to the Duggars. Like, they were influences on our lives and how we lived based on how perfect they made themselves out to be. There are just so many things that go on in cults behind closed doors that nobody talks about, and there are smaller cults and smaller religions that aren't as big and powerful as the cult of the Duggars, but they're out here doing the same shit like my cult. I just thought that there were some crazy similarities that not only I didn't realize, but I had forgotten over the years because I moved out when I was 17 years old and did not look back to that cult or that religion or that church or anything like that, and I began living my life the way that I longed and wanted to my entire teenagehood that got taken away into Spence and living in a fucking cult. You know? Thanks for hanging out and listening to my religious trauma. Say bye, Tess.